Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
Here's the president reading some of the words that were written for him today.
No child, no teacher should ever be in danger in an American school. No parent should ever have to fear for their sons and daughters when they kiss them goodbye in the morning.
And of course, we know that every child and every teacher is in danger in every American school, because part of Donald Trump's definition of making America great is to make sure that our mass murderers are the greatest mass murderers in the world and have the best equipment in the world. Here's Florida Governor Rick Scott today.
We know the parents need to wake up in the morning and say, I know my children can go to a safe school.
Of course, not one parent in Florida can wake up tomorrow thinking that their children go to a safe school, because Governor Rick Scott has done everything he possibly can to make sure that Florida's mass murderers are the very best equipped mass murderers in this country and in the world. Any 18-year-old in Florida can walk right up to the counter and buy an AR-15 assault weapon on the spot and walk right out of the gun store and immediately open fire right there in the parking lot if they want to on whoever they want. And Rick Scott is absolutely committed to making sure that 18-year-olds in Florida continue to have that right. We saw hell in Florida yesterday, and we saw heroism at the same time. Heroism to which no words could ever do justice. Teachers and students were killed while they were saving the lives of other students. American soldiers killed in action get a $100,000 tax-free death benefit for their families. American teachers killed in action get absolutely nothing. More American teachers were killed in action yesterday than American soldiers. The teachers killed in action yesterday will immediately, in fact, have their names removed from the school payroll now that they have been identified. That's it. Their families won't get one more paycheck. 18-year-old high school senior Meadow Pollock was murdered yesterday. Her parents kept calling her cell phone only to hear it ring and ring and ring. 14-year-old Martin Duque was a freshman. A friend said that just before the shooting, he and Martin were, quote, just playing around, talking about jokes and stuff. 14-year-old Jamie Gutenberg was a freshman. Her father said on Facebook that he is, quote, trying to figure out how my family gets through this. Her aunt, Abby Euclid, said that that her family could not, quote, protect Jamie from the sickness that has gripped our country. Joaquin Oliver was a senior. He came to the United States from Venezuela when he was 3 years old and proudly became a United States citizen just last month. Actually, it was last year, January 2017. Gina Montalto was 14 years old. Her mother wrote on Facebook that she was a smart, loving, caring, and strong girl who brightened any room she entered. Nicholas Dworet was a star swimmer who had just signed with the University of Indianapolis, where he was going to join their swim team. Carmen Schentrup was a 16-year-old National Merit Scholar semifinalist who was probably going to have her choice of colleges. Elena Petty was 14 years old. Her great aunt said on Facebook, "There are no hashtags for moments like this, only sadness." Luke Hoyer was 15 years old. His parents searched for him yesterday in hospitals, and then they finally went to the Law Enforcement Command Center, and that's where they learned that Luke was dead. Peter Wang was a 15-year-old freshman in the ROTC program. His cousin said she wasn't surprised to learn that Peter Wang was killed when he was holding a door to let other students escape. Cara Loughran was 14. Her family says she was an excellent student. Her aunt, Lindsay Fontana, said on Facebook, "We are absolutely gutted. While your thoughts are appreciated, I beg you to do something. This should not have happened to our niece, Cara, and it cannot happen to other people's families." Alex Schachter was a 14-year-old freshman. He played trombone in the marching band. Earlier this week, he was discussing with his father which classes he would take next semester. Helena Ramsey was 17 years old and a senior. A family member said on Facebook, "She was brilliant and witty, and I'm still wrestling with the idea that she is actually gone. She would have started college next year." Alisa Al-Hadaf was 15 years old. On Facebook, her mother said, "A knife was stabbed in my heart. I wish I could have taken those bullets for you." Scott Beagle did that. Scott Beagle took a bullet, or maybe several bullets, for the kids. He was a geography teacher and the cross-country coach. He rushed students into his classroom to protect them and was murdered in the hallway after they all got inside his classroom. One of the students said, "He was an amazing person, and I am alive today because of him. He will be missed." Chris Hickson was the athletic director and wrestling coach, and a coach at another school said, if you needed something, he was the first one there. Aaron Feiss was a graduate of the high school, and he was an assistant football coach and a security guard. Aaron Feiss jumped between the shooter and a student, and now he's never coming home to his wife, Melissa, and his 8-year-old daughter, Ariel. In American high schools now, you look around and you wonder who the shooter might be. Who in your high school might show up one day with an AR-15 and start wiping people out? The shooter who did that yesterday had been expelled from the school last year. Kids at the school talked about him as maybe one of the people who just might show up one day, show up with an assault weapon. But there was absolutely nothing they could do about that suspicion, because their federal and state governments have done everything that possibly can be done to make sure that those assault weapons are available to mass murderers who want to walk into their schools and start shooting. And so, when the gun stores open up tomorrow morning in Florida, another 18 or 19-year-old aspiring mass murderer can just walk into any one of them, buy an AR-15, and go back to his own high school or any other place he wants to go where he thinks he can murder a lot of people. And as long as Rick Scott is the governor of Florida, mass murderers in Florida have exactly the governor they need to carry out their crazed missions.
It is Friday, the 16th of February of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your Chef de Cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Folks, we are all truly Nighthawks in the diner of life. Well, I got to tell you, there are just about 10 million NRA monetary reasons why the GOP wants to make it easy for mass killers to kill massively. Paul Ryan thinks it's a knee-jerk reaction once again to even speak about guns being involved in these mass killings. It's always too early. And, of course, we know the knee-jerk reaction is Paul Ryan defending the NRA every single time this happens. Well, the difference, though, in this particular incident, I feel, if it's not a sea change, I feel a change. And it might be that the survivors of this tragedy are of the right age, possibly, that the outrage can be amplified for, if not a nation, a world to know and hear about. Yeah, I held out some, I don't know, romantic with a capital R, romantic hope that Sandy Hook would be that watershed moment when we as a nation and a society would change this illness that we suffer from. And it didn't happen. Okay. Maybe I'm old enough now to be a little bit cynical. But I really did hold out hope that Sandy Hook would be the moment. I mean, who could prop up the NRA after 6-year-olds were slaughtered in such a brutalized... Hours hadn't even passed by, and they were already defending the gun that was used. And so, these young adults at that high school are taking down the right-wing talking heads in a very effective way, and good for them. So what's on the rest of the menu? That was a bit of a long link, but there are real people who have died there in that high school. And thank you, Lawrence O'Donnell, for giving us some stories and a human face to this tragedy. Okay, on the rest of the menu, Facebook. God. Zuckerberg can't come to the halls of Congress or to the Senate and sit down at a hearing. He sends a lawyer, right? But Putin calls, and he's sitting right there next to him, and they film it and everything. Well, guess what happened this time? Yeah, well, Facebook complied with Russia's order to take down an Instagram video linked to Putin's rival Alexei Navalny, the guy that Putin keeps putting in jail because he's very popular. Well, Navalny had a video up on Instagram. Yeah, Facebook owns Instagram now. Well, that video exposes inappropriate links between Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Prihodko and Russian oligarch Deripaska on a yacht in Norway. So much for a free, open, and transparent social media platform. I guess my timeline's not going to show that either. Apparently, U.S. Representative Dan Lipinski wants the IRS to investigate improper financial deals by the leaders of the conservative Illinois Policy Institute. And the FCC Inspector General has opened an investigation into whether Ajit Pai improperly pushed for rule changes that benefited Sinclair Broadcasting. Well, we saw it in real time. We all complained about it. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a former Homeland Security official calls out the agency for publishing propaganda, inaccuracies, and half-truths in its press releases. And the GOP took another ruthless step in a massive right-wing court-packing scheme that will last for decades. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. should remind folks that show music for West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by my dear friend, Frances Livings. She's an LA artist, and if you are down in Southern California, she performs all over the Southland, in the beach communities, up in Pasadena, all over. So check her out. She and her group put on a great show. She's a fantastic ingenue storyteller, and you will be enthralled. Let's see. If you go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com, scroll down to the bottom of the homepage to the rightish is the chat room link. Our roaring girl, Kelly Lincoln, monitors that fairly diligently through the day, even though she has a job. I mean, come on. She works hard. And to the leftish of the chat room link are the contribute donate buttons. That's how we pay our bills. And your generosity is, well, and from the heart appreciated. So thank you for that. We are unable to do it without you. Oh, and podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as well as my music show on Sundays, the Justice Department, Music Sans Frontières, Music Without Borders, can be had by way of Spreaker, and I post links to that on the social media platforms as well as Daily Co's, so you can contact me at Justice Putnam on Twitter, and I can be found on Daily Co's as Justice Putnam. Oh, and one other thing, a repeat of each daily show is rebroadcast, because that's why it's a repeat, at 5 p.m. on the West Coast, so that would make it 8 p.m. on the East Coast. So if you missed today's show and you want to hear it on Netroots Radio broadcast, you can do that. And I do post the podcast of that, of each show, sometime after the show's over, because I can't do it before. Alrighty, so let's get on with these stories here at the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, Facebook complies. Yeah, complied. I call it Vichy Facebook. And this is by Arjun Karpal out of CNBC. Yeah, that's the business channel there at NBC. Facebook-owned Instagram has taken down posts related to bribery allegations made by Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny against the country's deputy prime minister. Navalny, who is Russian President Vladimir Putin's fiercest rival, posted a video on YouTube earlier this month that showed metals oligarch Oleg Deripaska allegedly meeting with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Sergei Prikhotko on the billionaire's yacht in Norway. That yacht is beautiful, I gotta tell you. Yeah, I don't really put, if you got the money to buy, one of these mega yachts, if I did, I'd be hard-pressed not to. I mean, everybody wants to be Captain Nemo, even the guy from Oracle. Yeah, I remember. See, I'm so old. I remember when Larry Ellison was just beginning his foray into yachting. And you do know that a few of his yachts have won the America's Cup. But in the beginning, he knew nothing. And I was working on yachts as an executive chef, fine dining yacht charters. And I told the story of Larry Ellison and his company having a couple of events on with our company through the years. He was a regular, and they would have a business holiday bash at least once or twice a year. And I never knew who Larry Ellison. I mean, I heard of Larry Ellison, but I wasn't paying attention. And so I never gave that guy any deferential behavior because I had no idea who he was. I just thought he was another person working, so I treated him like another person working and having a good time on the yacht. But the old salts who were teaching Larry Ellison how to sail, they could care less whether he was a billionaire or, some kid off the dock. And they would yell at him for, making mistakes. They really wanted them to stay on land. Let's put it that way. So just because you got a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean you know how to sail. So if you don't know how to sail, get a yacht. It's got a motor on it. And so Navalny's yacht is huge. Very pretty, too. I mean, it's well appointed. So, I don't know. If you got it, get it. The only thing is that then you got to find a berth big enough to, so that's why they anchor out. Sometimes they anchor out so far they got to take a helicopter that they bring along with them because they can. Okay, so in the video, Navalny used Instagram posts from a woman called Nastya Rybika, who he claimed to be an escort. That's a nice way of putting it. Rybka, okay, that's how her name is pronounced. Rybka was on the yacht with both Deripaska and Prihodko. The 25-minute video, which has been watched over 5 million times, claims that bribery took place. Oops, 5 million times, can't bring that back. But I think Facebook will try. If they have a targeted ability to be able to actually meld people's minds into belief systems, they can probably convince people those 5 million views of that YouTube video that was on Instagram, you never really saw that, did you? No, you didn't. Okay. The female involved, I like how that's the female involved. That's a nice impersonal way of putting it. In the video, took some of the Instagram posts down at the request of communications watchdog Rosk Mondazur, but the Facebook-owned service also complied with the order to remove 2 more posts. I think what they mean is that somebody came knocking on her door and roughed her up a bit. That's, I think, what happened. And Facebook, I don't know, they want the share. They want the market share. They've got China that they got to deal with, which is totally a repressive regime. And if you think that Russia is not a repressive regime, you've never dealt with mobsters in Queens. Okay, so Facebook's latest transparency report, which covers the period between January and June of 2017, shows it restricted 195 pieces of content after requests from Russia. Now, the YouTube video is still online and has not been taken down, because I think YouTube is Microsoft now, isn't it? Oh, Google, which owns YouTube, has not responded to a request for comment when contacted by CNBC. Basic Element, one of Deripaska's companies, said that the injunction against Navalny's video has nothing to do with any political struggle between him and his political opponents. Yeah. Okay. I think Boris and Nastasia are kind of laughing right now. Nothing to do with the political struggle that this guy, Navalny, keeps getting put. Oh, I don't know. It's not Navalny's yacht. I'm sorry, Deripaska's yacht. Deripaska. Navalny gets put in jail on a repeated basis because if you're in jail, you're not supposed to be able to run against Vlad. Okay, so Navalny took to Twitter on yesterday to slam Instagram, saying the company agreed to comply with Russian illegal censorship requests. And so that watchdog, communications watchdog, Rosk Mondazur, also ordered Navalny's own website to be blocked in Russia. The order from Russia's regulator comes ahead of the country's presidential elections in March. Instagram's latest episode with Russia highlights a key debate about the choices U.S. internet giants have to make in order to operate in certain markets. Some major figures have raised concerns about the power of internet platforms like Facebook and Google. Billionaire investor George Soros wrote a piece earlier this week in which he highlighted the danger of data-rich IT monopolies forming an alliance with authoritarian states that may well result in a web of totalitarian control, the likes of which not even George Orwell could have imagined. But you know what, Mr. Soros? Philip K. Dick imagined it. Uh-huh. So, Skynet, and I'm not talking about the British Murdoch concern. I'm talking about when all the computers got linked up and they wanted to get rid of us. Oh, Harlan Ellison was another one who imagined what might happen when data-rich IT monopolies allow artificial intelligence through algorithms to determine the quick and the dead. My time is flying. It's Friday. It's almost like an anything goes Friday. But let's get to this other story here out of ProPublica. Put together. Oh, no, they don't tell me. How dare you? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mike Dumka of ProPublica and Tina Svondalis from the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, U.S. Representative Dan Lipinski has asked the Internal Revenue Service to investigate whether a series of financial deals improperly benefited the leaders of the Illinois Policy Institute, the latest call for authorities to examine the influential conservative think tank. Now, of course, Lipinski is a Democrat, because you're not going to hear this from the Republicans, though. Surprisingly, there are Republicans responding to this, and not in a good fashion, to the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, that institute is owned and run by a guy by the name of Tillman, and so he is responsible for these, and he says that everything's on the up and up. All the tax filings have been done properly. But experts in nonprofit tax laws said that some of the transactions raised ethical and legal concerns. And basically, he was giving loans at zero interest from his nonprofit to the for-profit. And then the for-profit, because of zero interest, they're able to make money because of inflation. And so it definitely benefits the for-profit part. So, and Lipinski and the Democratic Party chairman, Michael Madigan, are frequent targets of Tillman and the Illinois Policy Institute. So there's a bit of, shall we say, a war going on. And but Governor Bruce Rauner, a former ally of Tillman's and a donor to the Institute, said he's very troubled by the report that ProPublica put out, and in which Lipinski has been citing to have the Illinois Policy Institute investigated. And he's not going to give this, Governor Rauner is not going to give another nickel to any of the institutes. And so it looks like the IRS may start looking into some of this. We'll see. Well, we are running a little behind here. This last offering here at the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, is by Cecilia Kang out of the New York Times. Now, last April, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Ajit Pai, led the charge for his agency to approve rules allowing television broadcasters to greatly increase the number of stations that they own. A few weeks later, Sinclair Broadcasting announced a blockbuster $3.9 billion deal to buy Tribune Media, a deal those new rules made possible. But by the end of the year, in a previously undisclosed move, the top internal watchdog for the FCC, opened an investigation into whether Mr. Pai and his aides had improperly pushed for the rule changes and whether they had timed them to benefit Sinclair Broadcasting. Now, it's unclear the extent of the Inspector General's investigation or when it might conclude, but the inquiry puts a spotlight on Mr. Pai's decisions and whether there had been coordination with the company. It may also force him to answer questions that he has so far avoided addressing in public, and the inquiry could also add ammunition to arguments against the Sinclair Tribune deal. Public interest groups and Democratic lawmakers are strongly opposed to the deal, arguing that it would reduce the number of voices in media and diminish coverage of local news. I would say it's not only being argued against by public interest groups and Democratic lawmakers, but by the citizenry. If Sinclair and Tribune Media are able to merge, they will reach 7 out of 10 American homes. Just letting you know. So apparently what had happened is that in this investigation, it was revealed that Pai and his aides had improper communications with Sinclair Broadcasting, in which they, how shall we put it, discussed strategy. And what Ajit Pai couldn't figure out on his own had already been planned. Almost like Alex legislation in a box. Very much similar to this. So this could put a damper on this merger. It could throw the whole process into disarray. And, well, it should. Now, let's get to our break. We'll come back and go through the weather and then finish up at the chef's table. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The states, although limited by the Constitution and the Federal Voting Rights Act, still make some decisions regarding voting rights. All states have laws saying only citizens have the right to vote, although the Constitution does not require this. Every state requires that people must live in the state for a period of time before they can vote, and all states except North Dakota require citizens to register before voting. To register to vote means to have your name added to a list. Voters are required to register to ensure that they are qualified to vote and to keep people from voting more than once. Throughout our history, we have used our Constitution to achieve nearly universal adult suffrage. Today, almost every American of voting age has the right to vote. This has made the United States one of the most democratic nations on earth. In recent years, however, there has been a steady decline in voter turnout for elections. If the United States is to be a country that is truly of, by, and for the people, it is essential that the people exercise their right to vote competently and responsibly. Responsible voting is essential to democracy. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on February 15th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. Anti-union forces in the United States are aimed at destroying public employee and teacher unions with a Supreme Court case to be heard in February 2018. The case is called Janus versus the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME. The main question in the case is whether a 40-year-old law which protects the financial capability of unions to negotiate collective agreements will be annulled. The 1977 law called Abood versus City of Detroit Board of Education declared that workers who are not members of their workplace union must still contribute financially to the expenses related to bargaining new contracts. These fees are known as agency fees because the union acts as a bargaining agent for workers who have decided to not join the union. The agency fees are known as fair share fees because the non-union workers benefit from the union negotiations, and it's only fair that they pay their share of the costs. Janus versus AFSCME was the topic of a media conference where representatives of 4 major unions warned about the dangers of unions losing the fair share fee. Mary Kay Henry, the president of the Service Employees International Union, the SEIU, was one of the speakers.
The essence of what this is about, people's ability to go to work with the purpose that they have every day and be able to advocate for themselves, their families, and the people they serve. And public employees all across this country are trying to make that happen. Anti-worker extremists don't want working people to have any power at all. The Janus versus AFSCME case is an attempt to divide us from each other and to limit our power in numbers. We know that if we lose this case, there will be a well-financed public relations campaign to convince our members that they're better off on their own as individuals rather than united together in an organization. We are fighting this attack from the Supreme Court, and our members are taking to the streets on February 24th and 26th to show that we're going to stick together no matter what. We are bound and determined to not let any court case, any president, any state legislature stand in our way from sticking together. We're going to double down on our support for non-union workers who are fighting for 15 in a union all across this country. There are millions of people in this country that want to join together in this economy. It is unacceptable in the richest nation on earth that 64 million people are working more than 80 to 100 hours a week and still can't make ends meet. Those 64 million are supporting children and elders. There's over 100 million people in our country that have been consigned to poverty, and there's plenty of resources to make that not so. And we know that the best long-term solution to rewrite the rules, unrig the economy and the democracy, is by making our government take action to help millions of working people be able to join together in unions. So I'm proud to be together with unions across the labor movement who are standing up against the attack on working people. And together we're going to fend this attack off, and we're going to unite and drive a turnaround in November of 18 and again in 2020, and we're going to create the conditions for millions more people to be able to join together and end poverty wage work once and for all.
Labor unions are organizing a national day of action about the fair share fees for February 24th. The Supreme Court is scheduled to start hearings on February 26th. A decision is expected later this year or early 2019. And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Belanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. A medical study of 21 U.S. diplomats serving in Havana, Cuba, has found consistent signs of possible acquired brain injury after the diplomats were subjected to auditory and sensory phenomena. To put that in plain English, American diplomats complained about hearing a persistent noise in their homes and hotel rooms that they alternately described as buzzing, grinding metal, piercing squeals, and humming. There's some speculation the Cuban government or other actors used a sort of sonic weapon against the diplomats, though investigations continue and Cuba denies any wrongdoing. Either way, those 21 diplomats have experienced long-term medical symptoms at least 3 months after leaving Cuba. 17 recorded cognitive impairments, 15 trouble hearing,
while 18 had vision problems and difficulty sleeping. Late last year, the U.S. pulled a majority of its embassy staff out of Cuba in order that 17 Cuban diplomats in the United States leave the country. Russia is accusing unspecified Western countries of interference ahead of presidential elections next month. Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson levied that claim Thursday, citing, quote, destructive interference, though she didn't elaborate. That accusation comes days after top American intelligence officials testified that they had no doubt Russia interfered in the 2016 U.S. election and intends to repeat that interference in this year's midterm elections. And U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is in Turkey today, and he was met by an unwelcome pronouncement from the country's defense minister, who ordered the U.S. immediately break ties with Kurdish fighters in Syria. That proclamation is the latest sign that Turkey and the U.S., ostensible NATO allies, find themselves increasingly at odds. Turkey is currently assaulting Kurdish-held territory in Syria, while the U.S. cooperates with those same fighters in counterterrorism operations. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for joining us here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. So now that we are, seated here at the Chef's Table, we'll open up with a palate cleanser, which is always weather from around the world, and we begin along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 25 degrees Fahrenheit. It feels like 24. I went outside, I don't know, it felt like 25 to me. It could have been 24. On the other hand, it could have been 21. It was cold. Crunchy, too, because humidity is at 92%, and even though they call that dry conditions, will continue. Quite a bit of freezing of what would be liquid out there. Not falling, but it's crunchy. So, air quality index is supposedly good at 43 parts per million, right on the cusp to becoming moderate. So pressure is at 29.31 inches. Visibility is up at 9 miles. It was a lot less much earlier this morning. And as I mentioned, humidity is at 92%. And that's that. So weather from around the rest of the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people plugged them somewhere on their property. They started uploading data. And these people live around the world. London is 50 degrees and fair. Paris is 49 and fair with a flood watch warning. Rome is 56 and sunny. Kiev, 32 and cloudy. Kabul, 44 and fair, which is always not a good weather report for Kabul. Or anywhere in Afghanistan, because of, what do they call it? Line of sight. Yeah, you won't want to be a wedding party this weekend. Stay inside. Even that might not be safe. Hong Kong is 65 and clear. Tokyo is 44 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia, in the dead of summer, is 71 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco is 46 and sunny. And New York is 55 degrees, fair, with a winter storm watch. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people plugged them somewhere on their property. They started uploading data. And these people live around the world. Starting off here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an article by Esther Yushile, How to Think Progress. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security published a series of so-called press releases panning various bipartisan immigration amendments yesterday. On the same day, senators made moves to debate elements of a framework that provides permanent protections for certain undocumented immigrants and secures the border. Ultimately, on Thursday, yesterday, the Senate failed to pass any amendments to move forward on immigration. Senators neither approved bipartisan proposals nor the framework set forth by the Trump administration that included 4 pillars to change the immigration system. 4 pillars. Sounds like something Stephen Miller wrote back at Santa Monica High in its civics class. How to tear apart a democratic republic in 5 easy steps. Okay, so, you have 4 pillars, and then you knock them over. The open debate on the Senate floor comes months after the Trump administration ended DACA, which provided temporary work authorization and deportation relief for immigrants who came to the country as children and became undocumented or entered the country without inspection. In September of 2017, Donald Trump called on Congress to pass a bill granting permanent protections for these young immigrants known as dreamers. It's the American dream. I know, we want to make it a nightmare for them like it is for us too. You want to know what it's like to be American? We'll show you. Jesus. And let's once remind ourselves, Donald Trump, his crew, and the GOP all brought it on themselves. Okay, now, published prior to the Senate votes, the 5 DHS so-called press releases all strongly criticized the immigration system and called for strong border security measures. Oh my God. Okay, so one of them started criticizing Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds and Susan Collins. Rounds is a Republican from North Dakota. That they are destroying the ability of Homeland Security that could create amnesty for illegal aliens and criminals. This is the DHS in a press release. Now let's remind ourselves how it usually would work. The political appointee of the agency would come before Congress and express their displeasure at the Congress and Senate trying to make illegal aliens come in here and chop everybody's heads off on YouTube. And then they could have that debate. But a press release is a factual statement by a government agency. It's not just some willy-nilly opinion piece from the Wall Street Journal or Breitbart. It is a factual government document. I know, I'm romantic. That's how it used to be, but everything's got to change now. As my Trump bro would say, Trump is the right president for the right time, which says everything you need to know about their ignorance of how our system of government works and their out-and-out disdain to the point that they don't care about it being destroyed because they know better in their ignorance. I always like that part. Well, back to this article here. The DHS just continued with these press releases, 5 more. And each one of them even more inflammatory than the next. So, a former Homeland Security official said that it was highly unusual. He had never seen anything like it. It's highly unhelpful. The other parts that raised a lot of questions in this person's mind, that there's no attribution. Normally, a press release, when we would put it out, we would say it's a statement from the Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, the former DHS official questioned the utility of publishing press releases that read like a screed based on length alone and the lack of attribution, especially Now, this is where it's supposed to work. The DHS agency itself has a legislative affairs staff whose job is to communicate concerns about congressional bills, amendments, and other pieces of legislation. And the official then expressed surprise and frustration over the citation of old reports to support a claim made by the White House over potential diversity visa fraud. Oh, yeah, the lottery. Says that this is all propaganda. It's inaccurate. Unless you put something in quotations in the release, it's supposed to be about fact. These are all about accusations and opinions. And it's one thing for the secretary or the head of ICE to say it eviscerates the authority of DHS to put down that as fact doesn't meet the normal standard of being in a press release. And the former DHS official also expressed disappointment over how Trump moved the goalpost. It was supposed to be about finding a solution to DACA. Well, they don't want a solution. They want to deconstruct the administrative state.
Dansez maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
Now, this last article about the GOP taking another ruthless step to pack the courts. It's by Stephen Rosenfeld out of Alternet. And this is the most egregious partisan intervention since Mitch McConnell blocked Barack Obama's Supreme Court nominee. Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans ended a century-old tradition yesterday that will accelerate the appointment of right-wing federal judges in purple and blue states, where they will preside over thousands of cases that will never reach the Supreme Court. The move, led by Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Charles Grassley of Iowa. Do not trust Charles Grassley. Oh, he looks so homey and down home, and he's all just so calm, and he talks in these elliptical ellipses, and the next thing you know, yeah. He's investigating the investigators. Well, this is the most egregious partisan intervention since Mitch McConnell blocked Obama's final Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland. Yep. Michael Brennan gets voted out of the Senate Judiciary Committee along party lines, despite the fact he refused to acknowledge implicit racial bias in the justice system. Vanita Gupta, president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and former head of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division under President Obama. She said that Grassley kills the blue slip tradition with this vote. Brennan is voted out over objection of a home state senator. Now let's remember, Grassley blue slipped 3 of Obama's African-American circuit nominations. But now he's changed his policy to ram through 2 of Trump's white circuit nominations. Michael Brennan said, Michael Brennan tweeted Christopher Kang, who served in the Obama White House's counsel for more than 4 years and was in charge of its judicial nomination process. So that was Christopher Kang who said that in a tweet. Nice. Yeah. Blue slip policy blocked Obama's African-American circuit nominations. But, hey, Brennan, let's go. Well, these comments underscore that Republicans under Trump are packing the federal courts with right-wing nominees, many of whom are not even qualified to hold these lifetime posts. And let's remember, these federal courts, especially at the appellate level, hold a tremendous power. Supreme Court gets only 7,000 appeals annually and hears only about 100 to 150 cases. Federal appeals courts received about 60,000 appeals annually. And they're the final arbiter about what goes to the Supreme Court. So what transpired yesterday was both procedural and political. On procedure, the Republican Judiciary Committee Chairman, Grassley, overrode an objection by Michael Brennan's home state senator, Democrat Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, who did not return a so-called blue slip, in effect putting Brennan's nomination on hold. Dianne Feinstein reminded everybody this is a 100-year-old tradition. It's not official policy. It's not a rule, but it has been a tradition for over 100 years. And but Grassley overrode Baldwin and voted on Brennan's nomination, which moved the Senate on a party line vote. Since its inception, no Democratic chair of the Judiciary Committee ever held a hearing for a judicial nominee over the objection of a Republican senator. That's fact, and it is history, Feinstein insisted. But Grassley's decision is also extremely political. Not only does it show that Republicans will dispense with any rule or tradition that stands between them and exerting political power, it also shows that the GOP is eager to foist extremist judges on purple and blue states. Okay, and but more is at stake than Grassley's hypocrisy. The Republicans are engaged in a massive right-wing court-packing scheme that will last for decades, long after the Senate's current Republican majority is gone. This is one of Trump administration's most potentially damaging legacies. But as far as I know, there's still, an impeachment process, and unqualified has been used in some fashion of impeachment of judges in the past, and I think there's precedent for that. Well, we are at the end of our broadcast period for today and the week, though there is great content on Netroots Radio through the weekend, and I'll have my music show on Sunday night, so tune into that. The Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour with Ricky and Kelly tomorrow. Okay, so stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day and through the weekend, and we will visit with you on Monday in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, d'être tendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.